power creep and OSRS.
To YouTube. I am still feeling fairly sick, but unfortunately, opinions need to be made. And I am here to provide opinions for you. So that is what we're going to do today.
Bro, Gnome always comes with the opinions on the updates. He tends to have a strong opinions on a lot of things. And I like that. I like when somebody has ideas on how to make things better or change things, and then we can weigh our opinions on his opinions, and we can opinion off on who's right and who's wrong. You know what I mean? It's good.
Jagex is going back to the Blood Moon Rises rewards and kind of tweaking some stuff. Some stuff is getting buffed, some stuff is getting nerfed over what they proposed. So we're going to look at that. What does that exactly mean for the game? What's going to be good? What's going to be not good? We'll look at it. Besides just looking at the rewards, we're also going to talk a little bit about power creep's place in the game. A little bit of power creep is actually good. So we'll talk about the place with that. They're trying to curb it a little bit with some of their tweaks. Is that appropriate? Like, should the items be powerful from certain updates? Should they not? We'll take a look at that too. First things first, the Crimson Bludgeon, which is the Crush Claws, they're naming the Crimson Kisten. Not only that, they're also buffing it a little bit, so it has an extra 23 crush bonus, which sounds like a lot because now it's up to plus 80 total crush bonus. So I was curious, does this like change where it's going to be good anywhere? Because it is rolling this number 4 times, right? So that accuracy matters quite a bit, probably. So I went to check if like there's a couple places where it was like really not good before where I did calcs. Checking main thing to see was if it was decent in Tob. It's not. It goes from 21% worse than Claws on P2 Verzik to 16% worse. So like, not great. It's usable on the other bosses when you drain them to 1, but Claws are still just like better in Tob. Main thing with these Claws is it's going to be the new best spec at Fasani. There's also Vedion. I don't know if you're going to bring a spec weapon to that, but you know, it's an option. And then Araxor, it's also going to be the best spec at. I'd imagine it's probably best spec at Saracnus as well, because she's weak to Crush. Not too many uses for it, though. There's not a ton of, like, Crush-weak bosses in the game. A lot of people would be like, oh, Tecton, but, like, you want a Warhammer Tecton, so that's not really ideal. And there's, like, nothing in Raids, really, that's weak to Crush. I checked Kefri. It's still worse than Voidwaker.
Raids
a
4.
Bit. Like, it's almost usable in Kefri, but, you know, it's just not great in Telwa either. It just doesn't have a ton of use in the game, which they go into in the blog as well. They say against enemies where Crush isn't ideal, the spec still works just without the same ceiling, and that's true. Like, it's if you're an Ironman who doesn't have Claws but you have this, like, you can probably use it in place of Claws. It just won't be quite as good. Oh, it's like usable, but like its main uses are bosses that aren't like just not a ton of bosses. Burning Claws are good almost everywhere, and then Voidwaker has uses. CCB is insane everywhere, so it kind of like of the existing spec DPS weapons, this is probably like the least usability, I would say. Of course, always a fair assumption that Crush is going to get used at the boss it comes from as well, probably to some extent. It wouldn't surprise me if it's the best spec at Maggot King. I would expect that at least.
Probably.
You know, and there's going to be more uses in the future as well for Crush type specs. So yeah, it's just not better than Claws where Claws are good. And like there's existing specs that are usually just better than this. It's just got a few uses. I wouldn't say it's a bad addition to the game. It's just, you know, a little more.
Chat, are Dragon Claws, do they have a Crush option? Or is Crush just so strong that on Slash that you still use them anyway? No Crush. Okay.
Than some items. And they go into ranged balance. So they say, rather than looking at each upgrade in isolation, we made a small targeted adjustment across both items to reduce the combined power. And you see these changes reflected in the sections below, but in short, we've reduced the accuracy of both Seeker Arrows and Necklace of Pursuit, which they're calling Rupture, to plus 20. So they're lowering that accuracy a little bit. Madrice gives some reasoning. We acknowledge this update brings a significant amount of power to the range style, which it does. We'll go into that. As the game continues to be updated, we expect the power of each style to continue and ebb and flow. Whilst ranged is receiving a big boost to its power with this update, we expect future updates to push the power of other styles. We don't expect these changes to make a huge difference to this power spike, but in order to taper it a little bit, we made some small changes, which I think are actually some really good changes. So we'll get into like how this fits into meta and that kind of thing. So they're talking about the necklace.
I heard that Tebow was going to be incredibly strong with the new arrows and new necklace, and it's already insanely strong. So that might have been one of the reasons why they nerfed. We'll see if he says anything about it here.
Necklace has been nerfed a little bit in its accuracy. They're also looking at renaming it instead of Pursuit. They're looking to name it either the Necklace of Rupture or the Necklace of Paroxysm. I think Rupture rolls off the tongue a little better, personally. I would rather that name, but I mean, Paroxysm is kind of cool. I could see it, I guess. And this is the design for it. There was also on Reddit a mock-up for a different version, which is more in the color theme of the Maggot King. I think this looks really cool. It's a little bit duller and blends in a little better. I honestly like this a lot more. It's kind of hard to say without looking at it against armor to like make a judgment, but I would kind of prefer they go with this redesign.
Do you think Jagex just expects someone from the community to make something and they can just use it at this point? The community always cooks. I swear. W Reddit community.
Over their original, which kind of just looks like a kitted berserker necklace. Like that kind of already exists in the game. So maybe something a little different might be cool. Okay, and they kind of go into the reasoning for why they're doing what they're doing. We've seen a lot of discussion around how the Necklace of Rupture fits in the wider ranged ecosystem, especially alongside seeker arrows and powerful weapons like the Twisted Bow. Recurring theme in the feedback is concern about range continuing to gain ground. So effectively, pre-changes here, it was roughly an 8% increase to DPS with T-Bow, which is very big. That's a very, very, very big increase in damage. But to be fair, that's only with T-Bow, right? It's not going to affect things that don't shoot arrows. So things like blowpipe, things like Bofa, like the typical ranged weapons you would use besides T-Bow were not getting buffed. It's a big buff to the mega rare, but other things are kind of being, they're getting small buffs from the necklace, but not massive from the arrows. Basically, they say more broadly, we don't see balance as something static. As the game evolves, different combat styles will naturally move forward at different times, which is totally true. Our aim isn't perfect parity in every situation, but ensuring no single style becomes the obvious choice everywhere, and that meaningful choices remain part of high-level play. And we'll talk about this in a little bit, but this change is just enough, I would say, to make it so it's not overtaking items where it shouldn't. We'll get into exactly how crazy the arrows were. The talk about the arrows is the arrows are the really crazy upgrade, I would say, from the update, more so than even the necklace. They've changed it to plus 20 instead, so lowering that range accuracy a little bit. Keep in mind they also have a minimum hit of 3, but they add some clarity on this that also makes them a little worse. So they say down here, clarifying the minimum hit, we saw some questions around how the minimum hit interacts with damage modifiers and multi-hit weapons. To clarify, the minimum hit is applied after all damage modifiers, and your damage is rolled and calculated as normal, and only then raised to 3 if it would have been lower. So in Gearscape, for all the calcs, what they assumed is you're just rolling from 3 to max it, which I think was 92, in most cases. So 3 to 92 would be your roll. Jagex is saying no, your roll is 3, 3, 3, 4, 5, 6. So 1 and 2 just increase up to 3.
Got it. So you could still hit 1s or 2s, they just get boosted.
So it's not reducing the amount of rolls. It's still the same amount of rolls. It just, if you rolled a 1 or a 2, it's a little bit higher, which is a lot worse. That's a lot worse the way it's rolling than what we assume.
Guaranteed
so the
hit,
numbers
which is
in Gearscape that I did the calcs with assume that minimum hit is better than it is. So that's something to keep in mind. Basically, the way the meta shakes out with these arrows is anywhere where Shadow was pretty close to T-Bow in power, where Shadow was maybe a little bit better than T-Bow. Think places like Zilliana or Giant Mole. Now T-Bow is significantly better than Shadow. That's effectively how it shakes out, which isn't really a big deal. They were already very close to begin with. Both are still going to be good weapons against those bosses. It's just a little less usability for Shadow, which is not a big deal. My issue with this update is that in Colosseum, T-Bow overtook Scythe on every single mob, almost, except for Soul, obviously, which is not okay. First of all, it just makes playing Colosseum a lot more boring. Shooting things from a distance is a lot easier than meleeing, so when you also get more damage for doing that, it just makes it simpler and more boring. So doing the more dangerous thing is also worse damage, which is silly. It was extremely, extremely close before this change. There's certain mobs, like the Javelin Colossus.
What do you guys think about that? Should melee be the premier option in Colosseum where you are slightly penalized for being in melee? Similar to doing Inferno with melee. I see what he's trying to say there. Doing something harder should reward you with more damage. Yeah, but at the same time, was Colosseum designed to be meleeed? I'm not so sure it was. So just because you want to melee it and melee is harder, I'm not so sure that should guarantee you more damage if that's not the way it was designed. It was, according to Nox, who was the lead dev on it. Oh, it was. If it was designed that way, then yeah. If it was designed for melee to be more damage, that sucks if this overtakes it. I don't know. I don't have a solution for that, though. Let's see what No Monkey says.
that T-Bow was the exact same as Scython. And then things like the Manticore or like the Shockwave Colossus, T-Bow was a little bit better. This nerf, along with the clarification on the minimum hits, should mean that Scythe is still just a hint better than T-Bow. Like, it makes T-Bow better, but Scythe should still be better in Colosseum. I can't do the calcs because that minimum hit is hard to change, but considering how close they were, I'm going to assume that T-Bow is still going to be a little bit worse, at least on most of the mobs. So what that means is, in Colosseum, you're still going to Scythe everything, like, the intended, like, best style is still best, but Venator Bow is getting a huge buff, because Venator Bow on each ricochet is also getting that minimum, which is really, really strong, along with the accuracy, because Venator Bow rolls accuracy on each of the ricochets as well. So getting a huge increase to accuracy also matters a lot for that. So it's going to be a lot faster, but the meta is not being completely changed, which I appreciate. This nerf is just enough to make it so Colosseum isn't changing dramatically, which I like. I like that a lot. I was looking in the Reddit thread and I saw someone say like, I don't think that Scobo should be better than Bofa, and this update's going to make that happen. No. No. Not even close. Not even close. Like, Scobo was so far behind Bofa that this little buff it's getting is not even close to... It's roughly 20% worse than Bofa at all times still, even with the arrow buff. So that's not going to be a thing. Don't worry about that. What it does do, though, is it buffs it dramatically at places like Mocha, where you're using Void Armor, which doesn't have a lot of accuracy, but it has huge damage. That accuracy from the arrows is just pure benefit to you, to your armor that doesn't have a lot of accuracy to begin with. So it's a massive buff at places like Mocha. Where Scobo is already good, it's getting a lot better. So you can expect that for sure. So Venator Bow getting a big buff. Nice. Scobo getting a big buff where you used it, not in places you didn't use it. And T-Bow's getting a huge buff. So that's what you can expect. It's not completely shifting the meta really anywhere. So I appreciate that a lot. Considering this is not a raid boss, it would be a little weird for it to completely shift what weapon you're using at like massive pieces of content like Colosseum. So I feel like this is in a good spot. It changes things a little bit and it makes things more powerful, but it's not completely like turning the game upside down, which you would expect from a non-raid encounter. Like, raids are the place where we should be turning the game upside down, right? I'm going to really briefly talk about the Leechfin sandwich. They're not really changing it. I didn't really like this. So if you missed how it works, basically this is 2 tick healing food that gives you 16 health. And then when you melee, it gives you an additional 16 health. So it's massively healing food. It's also very, very slow to eat. You can't eat multiple pieces of food quickly. You have to wait a full 9 ticks before you can eat another one. So it heals you a ton while you're meleeing, and then you can't eat another one for a long time. Really, really weird the way it works. And they mentioned, like, basically they're just sticking with it. Like, they know it's weird and that's okay, basically. This gives us more flexibility to differentiate food effects by combat styles in the future without every new food behaving the same way. So theoretically, we'd have like melee food and ranged food and magic food. And I just don't think this is adding anything to the game. I'm going to be honest. I don't really see it. Maybe I eat my words and this is like the coolest thing I've ever seen, like deep down the line. But right now, I don't know.
Dude, I had this exact same thought. I'm like, I think when we read over this update, I was like, why are we putting this in the game? Can we spend time on something else? Because I just didn't feel like it was worth the design time or whatever that they spent on it. Like, I didn't really think that there was much of a need for this in the game. But I'm kind of also with Noam here. Like, maybe it ends up being something crazy cool. Some people said it could help on fights like Vardorvis. I haven't done Vardorvis yet. So maybe it helps extend certain trips where you're using melee and you're only using food for a long period of time.
No, this feels like you're just getting heavily rewarded for melee specific bosses, like places like Vardorvis. It's going to be really strong, but you're not doing anything to get that extra health, right? It's just when you're meleeing bosses, you get more health. It's just it's a weird item. They're trying something experimental here. I'm not sure I'm down to experiment on this one. I personally am not a huge fan of it. You know, if it comes into the game, the world is not going to end. It's just kind of weird. Honestly, I think if there's a food for every combat style you need to use on top of healing potions like Brews, Armadillo Brews, like we have all of these different types of things, it's going to be really confusing for new players in the future. So I don't know. I really don't think this is a good way to add complexity to combat, but not the end of the world if it does get added. But I personally wouldn't vote yes to this, I think. Last little notes, they talk a little bit about drops in Vampirium. They mention that you're going to get Venator Fangs and Teeth, which can be used to make dragon arrows and darts. That's really nice, because they're always a big problem for Iron Men to get in large quantities.
Dragon arrows. I almost de-ironed for dragon arrows, bro. They're asked to get.
So it's nice for things to drop those. I appreciate that. He also mentioned dulled equipment. So things are going to drop like dulled like armor and weapons that you can then use crafting to restore and alch, which is going to give you some crafting XP. It'd be interesting if there's like a passive crafting method you could do while training on these monsters. Kind of a cool idea. I'm kind of down to see it. I hope it's not like a really tiny amount of crafting. I hope it's at least like reasonable. I'd be interested in this being like a new passive training method, but we'll see. We'll see. We'll see. And that's basically like it for the news post. I wanted to talk a little bit about power creep. So there's like two camps of people. There's the people like, yes, I want like unlimited power. I want the game to be more like RS3. I want like insane, like god slaying weapons and stuff. I want to, you know, things like that. And then there's people that are like, no, power creep should never be added. We should just progress the game horizontally. There is a little bit of both that has to happen. There's a little bit of both. This game is not doing the thing that RS3 did, which is just every new piece of content that gets added, add 3 new BIS weapons for every style and just make everything else irrelevant. I appreciate that old school doesn't do that.
Vertical progression sucks, but horizontal progression is harder to design. And eventually there has to be weapons that get replaced at some point for BIS. But maybe not for every single fight. That's why T-Bow does bonus damage to mobs that have high magic defense. It's like a unique thing. So that won't be BIS everywhere. And that's where good game design happens. So, yeah, I see what he's saying here. But eventually, like, there has to be a little bit of both, horizontal and vertical.
We keep older weapons relevant, and Abyssal Whip is still an item you're going to use, whereas in RS3, it's going to be at alch value, and you're never ever going to touch that, right? So old school does keep in mind the balance of older items and keeps them relevant, especially considering, like, there's progression in the game. We have different levels. There's early game, mid game, end game. So different things are going to be useful at different points, at the very least. So things that might have been end game weapons 10 years ago maybe are more like mid game weapons now. As long as they're still in the meta somewhere, that's what's important. If bosses don't have good rewards, you have the problem with like Fasani, where like it's a really difficult boss, but like nothing it drops matters that much. You don't really care about the items too much. You can be like, oh, Eldritch is really good for Inferno, but like, you know, these items are super rare. Are you going to go out of your way to get them? For the most part, no. Lately, they've been kind of riding the line a little bit. I think Oathplate from Yama was a little bit too much, in my opinion. BIS melee armor at the vast majority of
You guys think that you should get BIS melee armor at the point when you can do Yama, which is just right after Tormented Demons? I personally think that it's too powerful for where it's at in the game, and there's no reason not to just rush it. Like there's like Slayer rush into Yama is just too easy for how strong the gear is. And for that reason, I kind of hope that Oathplate gets replaced in Raids 4 or something like that. Because you get it too easily at the point in the game.
Places over Torva from a boss of the difficulty of Yama. Obviously, Yama's a little bit harder than your typical mid-game boss, but it's not like insanely difficult to access gear-wise, and it's not incredibly difficult difficulty-wise, right? I feel like Oathplate was a little bit too much. Personally, I would do generally is when you're adding items, if it's a high-level boss, it needs to be some stuff that's like, I feel like Blood Moon Rise is in a good spot, where it's like some stuff that pushes your power level a lot with like one style, but it's not like massively shifting balance as a whole, right? Like you're adding some things to upgrade stuff that is relevant, that matters.
Why are treads easier to get than all of the other boots? You guys think Doom has the items from Doom are too good for where Doom is at in the game? I kind of feel like that. You think boots should have been from Raids 4? The combination of 3 BIS items into one is like damn near mega rare level quality of life and power creep. Not having to bring all 3 boots or choose between them is damn good. I think we're cooking today, chat. I think Yama and Doom are a fantastic additions to the game, but the rewards that they give might be a bit too powerful for the placement at where they are and where you can do them in your account.
Matters, but it's not going to like make you use a different weapon at a ton of new bosses. Whereas raids should be the place that they are going crazy and kind of shifting things up. Like when they added the shadow from Toa, it was like, holy cow, like this changes everything. Like now shadow gets used here, 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 here. Everything I knew about the game is kind of changing. Like it's crazy how much is different. Masori changed a ton of stuff. Fang changed a ton of stuff. Maybe too much. But Raid should be the thing. If anything, Raid
A
should be the
lot of
thing
people,
that...
a lot of people say Fang is too OP for what it does, and I'm starting to notice that, like how good Fang is, and the that it can't roll like really low numbers, and it all. Oh, Fang got nerfed. It was stronger than that. Ah, so it must have been real bad, kind of like the blowpipe. The blowpipe had to get nerfed too, huh?
is making you think about what you're going to use in different places. Everything from Raids should be meta-defining. It is the, maybe not the most difficult, but it's the most complex content in the game. Usually requires, Toa kind of throws a wrench in everything. It should require teams to go do raids, and it should be the most complex content in the game. When you're talking about raids in an MMO, that should be like the content versus like killing high-level bosses and stuff is kind of a different level than raids, right? Part of the...
Do you guys see the game as most of the stuff in the game should be to prepare you for the raid? Or do you think it's okay that BIS stuff can just drop from everywhere? Because the mega rares are like undisputedly the best items in the game. I'm okay with mixed. Cranston, thank you for that prime. But the best items should come from the raid, you think? A lot of people play OSRS solo, so from everywhere. I think it should be the raid pulls from all aspects of the game. Imagine people who are perma solo who never achieve max. Everywhere you shouldn't have to run raids for the best gear. Scythe is not as good as the other two mega rares. I'm happy with niche items for people like pet hunters for other content. Raids should have big ticket items, but other boss can drop BIS. We need more items, alternatives to mega rares. BIS coming from raids makes sense if they're achievable solo. Every raid in OSRS is achievable solo. It's just harder. So keep that in mind. They already said that for Raids 4 as well.
Balance with adding new powerful items is also adding more places to use those items where they're making a big impact. So more high-level stuff in the game where these items matter is kind of what you need to make these, like, all of the niche side grades they're trying to add, like, make sense in the game's balance. Pretty much every item they add right now feels like it's devaluing something else. We even saw it with, like, the increase to damage to range stuff, like I said, like, it's devaluing Scythe at Coliseum, right? Everything they add is, like, stepping on something else because there's just so many items in RuneScape now. They've explored so much of the horizontal progression that it really is time to start pushing the game, I would say, to a new level.
I was thinking this too, bro. Like, from the conversations we've been having on the stream, and I know that, like, if there's 1,000, 15, there's 1,500 of us in here almost right now, and sometimes we can't think of like items that a majority of people would want to be added to the game, and like when we're having these types of conversations, it's tough to add more items to the game without increasing or replacing something else at this point, because the horizontal, I mean, we've already stretched out horizontal progression so much that we're reaching the edges of the book here. Like, how much more horizontal can we go? Because we're 20 years in right now of horizontal progression. And it works until there's no more room on the edge to push sideways. And so at some point, something's got to get replaced, you know, and it's about to be that point.
Level. Like, start adding some stuff that really changes stuff. The game is so filled out at this point, it's becoming difficult for them to add anything else. The other thing that comes with that is adding more bosses that drop BIS, where these kind of items matter a lot. Like, I'm thinking like bosses like a Raxor drop the BIS melee amulet. Like, it doesn't, you can kill a Raxor with very basic weapons. Like, there's not a ton here that's going to matter a ton for going and like getting the Rencor, right? If we have more bosses in the vibe of Fasani, like Fasani has a lot of issues, but Fasani has a very clear weakness, right? To like crush. If you have more like high level bosses that have a very obvious weakness where these items can shine a little bit more, like in the horizontal progression, it works a lot better. So it's like two problems. For one, they've added too many items, and two, they haven't raised the ceiling on bosses enough. So these are two avenues that they've got to like start hitting. I would be very bummed if the Rat King is similar to Yama, where it's like very accessible weapons are very good. Things like Demon Bane on Yama, and I don't think any kind of Bane weapon is going to be good on Rat King, so I kind of doubt it, but I meant Maggot King, my bad. I'm not even... Don't get lost in the weeds on the difficulty either. I'm not even talking about difficulty. I just mean adding new bosses, like more interesting bosses that give uses to all this gear they're adding. I'm thinking like when they added Tormented Demons, right? Suddenly, you've got people bringing a Darok's Axe, an Obby Maul, you've got people bringing a Ballista, like all these items that don't normally have a use, suddenly have a use because Tormented Demons have this weird mechanic going on where like you use a weird weapon. I'm not saying every boss needs some weird mechanic that you take advantage of weird items, but to more stuff where like that gives things a clear edge at certain bosses versus like every boss that comes out, I swear it's like, is it Tebow, is it Shadow, or is it Scythe? Like it's so boring. I'm okay with it being like, at the Mega King, yeah, you use Tebow. But maybe he has a thing where you get behind him and you hit him with a crush weapon, right? And then it does a ton of damage. Like some stuff like that. Just like at least part of the fight using some different weapons is going to make things more interesting and give more uses to stuff. So if they look into doing that a little bit more.
So Gnome's trying to hit it from the back with a crush weapon. I could see that being good.
Versus just like you sit there with the Tebow the whole fight and that's all you use.
We'll like the video.
Obviously, you're not going to use anything else if Tebow is best, right? Like you gotta shake things up a little bit. Add more bosses. Add more funny, weird mechanics. Like this is the kind of thing they need to do to also give room for these additional items being added. Power creep is only a problem if the PVM ecosystem doesn't support it. As long as Jagex keeps adding bosses, keeps adding more high-level stuff, mid-level stuff, low-level stuff, whatever, that's going to give all these new items that they're adding a use case, it's going to work in the game just fine. And it's going to give you more items that you're going to go after, more reasons to do progression, that kind of thing, instead of just making old content pointless, like power creep is usually like seen as. Like it just makes everything else useless. Well, it's fine as long as the game grows with the power creep. Does that make sense? Yeah. I briefly touched on raids rewards as well, because this kind of ties into it. I went to Jagex HQ, so it's not really fair. Not only is it not fair, I'm also NDA'd on everything I saw there to talk about like what exact rewards I would want from raids, but I do want to talk about like what raid rewards need to look like in like a future video, so look out for that. Maybe sometime in the future I'll make a video on that. But the rewards from raids need to be interesting and shake things up. Like that is the time to do it. I don't want something like a crush mega rare or whatever, just some boring mega rare that's like it barely fits in, like it's a little like it's a side grade to Scythe, stuff like that. Like I don't want a mega rare that's just like fine. I want it to be over the top, I want it to be fun, and I want it to be not too complicated. I want a new player to be able to go, oh, I want that twisted bow. When I get the money for it, I want that. I know what it does. Like it kills things goodly. That's what I would shoot for out of a mega rare. We'll have a video on it in the future. I think this is a massive discussion. I've talked about it a lot on stream, so look for that in the future. But and that's it for the video. I'm really excited for this update.
W video, no monkey. I enjoyed listening to his opinions on the patch and everything. And I think we're mostly in agreement. You could say that me and No Monkey are kind of on that same skill level when it comes to just like the game and you know, beating it and all of that. So I really appreciate his insight there. Do you think newer content feels easier because over the years, average player base has gotten better at the game? Guys, I'm trying to read the chat here. Goodness, can we settle down? Or are they just releasing easier content relative to before? I feel like over time, the average player gets better. Also, we have technology, keyboards, plugins. They're all helping us get better at the game more rapidly. So any content added to the game now will feel a bit easier. You know what I mean? And also, you have content creators like No Monkey making guides for everything now. He kind of creates, he'll go in and he'll find a method and he'll teach you the method that he's found. And if somebody else finds a better method, he'll learn that method. He'll teach you that method as well. So the content creators are just getting better too. And at the same time, I'm also getting better looking. And so if you factor that in to why it feels easier, then that's just one of the reasons. And a lot of people are saying that.